Senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, I rise to do a couple of things. I'm awaiting the arrival of the senator from Missouri. I'm going to make a UC motion to bring up a very important nominee in the Secretary of Defense Department. But before I do, I want to comment on a UC that I made 2 hours ago. I stood here in this spot, and I sought unanimous consent to bring forward the nomination of Amy Lloyd, who is the nominee to be Assistant Secretary of Education for Career and Technical Education. She passed out of the Help Committee unanimously. We knew there was a hold on her nomination. We didn't know why. And so I sought to bring forward her nomination. The senator from Utah, Senator Lee, appeared. And I asked him, why was he objecting to Amy Lloyd? And the good news was he answered. He didn't have to, but he gave me an answer. And he said that her work indicated an attachment to critical race theory. That was his response. And he cited an article. So I went up to him after and I asked him what the article was. And he referred me to an article dated August 2020 titled Diversifying Apprenticeship, Acknowledging Unconscious Bias to Improve Employee Access. And that was the reason he said on behalf of others, were opposing Ms. Lloyd's nomination for a really important position, focusing on career and technical education in the country. I went back to my office and I got the article. The article is 7 pages long, August 2020. It's actually 6 pages long. It is entirely uncontroversial. Mr. President, listen to this. There's a block that says, what is unconscious bias? Talk about fair and balanced language. Unconscious biases are social stereotypes about certain groups of people that individuals form outside of their conscious awareness. Is that controversial? Is that controversial? There are recommendations for diversifying apprenticeships because, as we know, Mr. President, there's a lot of apprenticeships where there are not many women in apprenticeships. Ms. Lloyd is a woman. She wants to diversify apprenticeships. That doesn't seem that unusual. The recommendations for diversifying apprenticeships in this controversial article, where the phrase critical race theory is never mentioned, are widen the selection pool, seek out workers across skill levels, develop transparent, detailed, and uniform criteria, get multiple perspectives, complement selection processes with program designs that increase access. This is just basic human resources. There's nothing in this document about critical race theory. And when I read it, thinking I was going to find some real reason to oppose Ms. Lloyd, I found this basic human resources 101, nothing about critical race theory. But then, Mr. President, I realized something even more amazing. I looked at the author of the article. This was being held against Ms. Lloyd's confirmation. The author of the article is Jessica Toglia, Senior Program Manager of JFF. Unless this is a nom de plume, Amy Lloyd had nothing to do with the article that was cited to block her confirmation for this position. So then I looked further. There's acknowledgments on page 7. Ms. Toglia thanks 10 different people who gave her ideas and thoughts that she put into these 6 pages. Amy Lloyd's name isn't among the 10. There are then 28 footnotes and references citing articles and other pieces of scholarship that were written. None of them are by Amy Lloyd. None. And so, in response to my request as the son of a welder that we ought to have somebody at the Department of Education who values career and technical education, this well-qualified individual who got out of the Help Committee by a unanimous vote is being now sort of tarred with the critical race theory label based upon an article that she had nothing to do with. Nothing to do with. I knew if I came back and stated this, like, well, who would listen and who would care? You can assert a reason, but the reason for opposition to her nomination has nothing to do with her. I'm here on another nomination, the nomination of Christopher Lowman to be Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment. That position, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment, is the principal assistant and advisor to the Department on logistics and material readiness. The Assistant Secretary prescribes the policies and procedures for the conduct of logistics, maintenance, material readiness, strategic mobility, sustainment support of DoD, supply, maintenance, transportation. Extremely important functions to have a military that works. We're watching the Russian military bog down in Ukraine right now for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is their military has not been sustained and maintained, and a lot of their equipment is bogging down. Mr. Lowman is the person who would do this important job, and he has been pending before us since November with a vacancy in that position in the Pentagon. Let me tell you about Mr. Lowman. He spent his entire life serving this country in the military, and I mean entire life. He was born on a military base in Germany because his father was an Army civilian. When he graduated from high school, he went to Monmouth University and then immediately joined the United States Marine Corps in 1984. Since 1984, 38 years, Mr. Lowman has worked first as a United States Marine and then as an Army civil servant, totally for more than 30 years. He's most recently served as the Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff to the G357 Directorate, which provides planning and staff management for agencies under the authority of the Combined Arms Support Command. He served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition Policy and Logistics. He deployed as a Director of Sustainment for the Combined Security Transition Command in Afghanistan from October 2017 to 2018. Prior to that deployment, he served as the Director of Maintenance Policy for the U.S. Army in the Office of the Chief of Staff. He was the Chief Supply Maintenance at Headquarters, U.S. Army Europe. He is a much awarded member of both the military and the military civil service. The Department of Army Integrated Logistics Support Achievement of the Year Award, 3 Army Meritorious Civilian Service Awards, the Army Ordnance Corps Samuel Sharp Award, the Army's Quartermaster Corps Distinguished Order of St. Martin. The Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment is the principal staff assistant and advisor to the Department on Logistics and Material Readiness. This is a most important function. Mr. Lowman is a Virginian who has served his entire life from his birth in military families or serving this nation as an active duty Marine and then as an Army civil servant. And for that reason, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate consider the following nomination, Calendar 777, Christopher Joseph Lowman of Virginia to be an Assistant Secretary of Defense, that the Senate vote on the nomination without intervening action or debate, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, that any statements related to the nomination be printed in the record.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Missouri.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, I want to thank the Senator from Virginia for accommodating me here and allowing me to come to the floor. And I thank him for his remarks. I only got to hear the second half of his remarks, but I thank him for his remarks and am sure that he is in earnest about this nomination. Let me tell you why I am here, and I'll be brief, Mr. President. I know we have a vote that is about to kick off, but let me tell you what I am in earnest about. The crisis in Afghanistan, the attack at Abbey Gate this past August that cost 13 American service members, including one from my home state, from the state of Missouri, their lives, is a catastrophe unparalleled in our foreign policy in my lifetime. And it is my firm conviction, and it is also a promise that I made to the family of the fallen Marine from my state, that we should do, this Senate should perform its oversight functions related to the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, and in particular, the events leading up to that attack at Abbey Gate that resulted in the deaths of those service members and the deaths of hundreds, I'm afraid, hundreds of civilians and many hundreds of other Americans left behind. I've come to this floor before many times now to ask the Senate to hold accountable those who planned and led or failed to lead, in some instances, this operation, leading to the attack at Abbey Gate, leading to that catastrophic loss of life, and leading, I'm afraid, to the disastrous turn in our foreign policy, the effects of which we continue to feel. And so it is my humble but earnest request that the Senate perform its basic oversight functions. And very briefly, let me mention one. United States Central Command ordered a report of the events leading up to the Abbey Gate attack that we learned of in February the 8th, I believe. We learned that that report had been completed. It's several thousand pages long. I have the barest summary of it here. My staff and I have been through all of it, the thousands of pages. They had over 169 interviews that U.S. Central Command conducted, again, to try and understand how we got to this crisis point leading up to and including Abbey Gate. We have not had a single hearing in the United States Senate Armed Services Committee on this report. Now, I applaud Central Command for carrying out the report, for ordering it, for putting it together. But we, Mr. President, should be learning what we can and holding accountable those who need to be held accountable. Who has been fired? No one. Who has been relieved of duty? No one. And if you read the report, and I commend it to my colleagues, if you read the report, you will see individual after individual, commanders on the ground, warning that we are not prepared, that the administration was not prepared to get civilians to safety in Kabul, warning that the planning was not adequate, warning that there were dangers. And so, Mr. President, I ask again that the committee do its basic oversight job, perform its basic functions, hold a hearing on this report, hold accountable those who failed in that catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan. Until that time, Mr. President, I'm going to continue to ask that the Senate observe regular order in leadership positions at the Department of Defense, and for those reasons, I object.
Mr. President.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President, I respect my colleague's right to object, obviously. But I will say, while the senator from Missouri raises very valid concerns, none of those concern this nominee, Christopher Lowman, and none of his concerns are addressed or enhanced by leaving the Pentagon without an Assistant Secretary of Defense for sustainment during a war in Europe where the United States military is playing a very important role. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Under the previous motion, the question comes on the Cola-Reddy nomination. The yeas and nays have been requested. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Barrasso.